It was a bright Saturday morning when Maria Thompson stepped out of the small bus that brought her to the state shooting championship. She stood quietly on the edge of the large parking lot, holding an old brown rifle case in her hand and a small backpack on her shoulder. Her clothes were plain simple jeans, a faded t-shirt, and an old cap that had seen better days. She didn't wear anything fancy or carry any modern equipment. Most people wouldn't have even guessed she was a competitor. She looked more like someone who had just come to watch. As she walked slowly toward the entrance, several people glanced at her. A few young men in flashy sports gear nudged each other and whispered something, laughing softly. One of them said, "Did someone bring their grandma?" Another added, "Maybe she got lost on the way to a knitting class." Maria heard them, but she didn't say anything. She just kept walking, her eyes calm, her steps steady. The shooting championship was a big event. It had drawn top shooters from all over the state. Most of them wore sponsor logos on their shirts, had expensive rifles, shiny gear, and large equipment bags with wheels. The announcer's voice echoed over the loudspeakers, calling out names and scores. As spectators moved around with snacks, cameras, and folding chairs, there was excitement everywhere. Maria made her way to the registration table. A young woman sitting there looked up and gave her a surprised smile. "Hi, ma'am. Can I help you?" she asked, clearly thinking Maria might be lost. "I'm here to compete," Maria said softly. The woman blinked. Oh, all right. "Can I see your ID and registration papers?" Maria handed over her documents. The woman typed her name into the computer and looked confused. "You're Maria Thompson. You signed up for the Open Rifle Championship?" "Yes." The woman looked at her again, hesitated, and then nodded. "Okay, you're all set. You'll be in Group C shooting around noon." Maria thanked her and stepped aside. As she moved toward the waiting area, a few other competitors noticed her and smirked. One young man with a shiny black rifle whispered to his friend, "That's going to be an easy win. Poor lady doesn't even look like she knows what a scope is." Maria found a quiet corner and sat down on a bench. She opened her old rifle case and began to clean her weapon carefully. The wooden stock of the rifle was smooth from years of use. It wasn't fancy, but it was well taken care of. Her hands moved with confidence and calmness. She knew every part of the rifle like it was part of her body. As she worked, she noticed a young girl watching her from a few feet away. The girl looked curious. Maria gave her a small smile, and the girl smiled back. A moment later, her father pulled her away and whispered, "Don't bother the old lady." Again, Maria said nothing. She just kept working. All around her, people were preparing for the competition. Some were warming up, checking their gear, chatting loudly about scores, records, and tactics. A group of men stood nearby, showing off their high-tech rifles and joking about who would win today. One of them pointed at Maria and said loudly, "Hey, maybe we should let her shoot first ladies before legends." Laughter followed. Maria ignored it. Time passed slowly. Maria didn't talk to anyone. She didn't move around much. She just sat quietly watching the other shooters, noticing how they held their weapons, how they aimed, how they handled pressure. She wasn't just sitting, observing everything. At one point, a volunteer walked past her and asked, "Do you need help, ma'am? Are you looking for someone?" Maria shook her head. "No, thank you. I'm just waiting for my turn." The volunteer looked surprised but nodded and walked away. A few competitors noticed that Maria wasn't talking to anyone. Some assumed she was shy. Others thought she must be a beginner, maybe entering her first competition at this age just for fun. Nobody took her seriously. Nobody asked her about her experience or where she came from. In their eyes, she was just a quiet, older woman who had somehow wandered into a serious competition. She didn't fit in with the crowd of young, confident shooters. Even the event photographer skipped her while taking warm-up shots. He focused on the flashy competitors, those wearing cool sunglasses, colorful uniforms, and expensive gear. Maria was invisible to the crowd, but Maria didn't care. She wasn't here to be seen. She was here to shoot. She remembered the first time she had ever held a rifle. She had been just 10 years old, standing on her father's farm, learning to shoot at empty cans on a fence. Her father was a quiet man, but strict when it came to teaching. He had taught her to respect the weapon, to breathe slowly, to take her time. She had spent hundreds of evenings practicing on that farm, hitting targets from long distances, alone and unnoticed. Years passed. Life changed. She grew up, got married, raised children, worked in a local store. She gave up competitions to take care of her family, but she never stopped practicing. Every weekend she went out to a quiet spot near the woods and shot at targets she set up herself. She didn't need an audience. She only needed her rifle and her focus now. She was finally here not to win a prize, not to prove anything to anyone, but to test herself. To see if all those years of quiet practice still meant something. The announcer's voice crackled through. The speakers again. Group C, please report to the shooting line. Group C, get ready. Maria stood up slowly. She closed her rifle case, slung her backpack over one shoulder, and walked toward the line. Several competitors glanced at her and chuckled. One man, tall and muscular, smiled and said, "Good luck, ma'am. Just keep it pointed in the right direction." Maria nodded politely. She stepped into her assigned lane and set her rifle down. Around her, younger competitors stretched their arms, adjusted their gloves, and checked their scopes. Maria just stood there quietly, breathing slowly, eyes focused. One competitor leaned toward her and whispered, "Don't be nervous, just have fun." Maria didn't reply. Behind the crowd, people were settling into their seats. A few parents waved at their children. Coaches gave last-minute tips. Everyone was focused on the usual stars of the competition. Maria looked at the distant target, small red dots surrounded by rings. It seemed tiny, almost like a speck. But she had seen smaller targets on her father's land and hit them. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the wind on the farm, the smell of dry grass, the steady beat of her heartbeat in her ears. When she opened her eyes, everything was still. Everything was quiet inside her, her fingers wrapped around the rifle. No one was watching her. No one expected anything, and that was exactly how she liked it. She lined up her shot, breathed in deeply, and waited for her turn. No one knew what was coming next. Not yet. The crowd at the shooting championship was alive with noise, laughter, and excitement. All around Maria, people were still busy preparing for their turns, but most of them were already talking about who was going to win. Many spectators were gathered behind the shooting lanes, clapping and cheering for competitors they knew or recognized from past events. Maria stood quietly in her lane, the same calm expression on her face. She held her rifle with both hands and waited patiently. But while she remained silent, the people around her were full of energy and noise. One young man named Dylan was standing just a few feet away. He was tall, confident, and wearing a black and green shooting uniform covered in sponsor logos. His rifle was brand new, and the price of it alone could probably buy Maria a car. He turned to the shooter next to him and grinned. "Look at this," Dylan said, nodding toward Maria. "She looks like she just walked out of a sewing class." The other shooter laughed. "I think my grandma has the same rifle. Is that even allowed in this event?" Another added, "Maybe she's here for charity, or maybe she's just confused." The group chuckled together. None of them lowered their voices. Maria could hear everything, but she stayed still. She didn't respond, didn't flinch, didn't even look at them. One of the volunteers walked past, noticed Maria standing with her simple rifle, and paused for a second. He tilted his head and walked up to her with a polite smile. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said. "Are you sure you're in the right group? Group C is for experienced competitors." Maria looked at him and gave a soft smile. "Yes, I'm sure. Thank you." The volunteer hesitated, then nodded. "All right then. Good luck." He walked away, but the doubt in his voice remained with some of the onlookers. A few of them whispered things like, "Did she say she's really competing? They even let her shoot in this level." Maria continued to ignore the noise around her. She adjusted the sights on her rifle, checked the position of her feet, and made sure everything was just the way she liked it. She didn't need approval from anyone. She didn't need to be seen as the last members of Group B finished there. "Round," the announcer's voice came through the speakers again. "Ladies and gentlemen, We now welcome Group C to the firing line. Please remain quiet while competitors take their positions. Shooters, please get ready." The noise from the crowd lowered just a little, and competitors moved into their places. Maria took one last deep breath and raised her rifle. Her arms were steady. Her hands didn't shake. Her heartbeat remained calm and even, while the others adjusted their headphones or talked to their coaches. Maria focused only on the target. It was the same as every other one she had shot at before. Distance didn't scare her. Pressure didn't bother her. For her, this moment was the same as those quiet mornings back on the farm. Behind her, Dylan was still whispering jokes. I wonder if she even knows which end of the gun is the front. A few people nearby laughed again, but there were a few others who had started to notice something different. A man standing near the score table leaned in toward one of the judges. "Who's that woman?" he asked. "She's not on any of our highlight lists." The judge checked his clipboard. "Maria Thompson. No sponsors. First-time competitor in this championship? She looks different." The judge shrugged. "We'll see what she can do." The command came over the speaker. "Competitors, you may begin." One by one, the shooters fired their first shots. The sharp cracks of rifles echoed across the range, followed by the soft clicking of digital scoreboards lighting up with numbers. Most shooters hit high scores: 9.5, 9.8, 10.0, but nothing special. Just the usual good performances. Maria lifted her rifle slowly. She took aim. Her body didn't move. She was like a statue, still silent, focused. She gently pulled the trigger crack. The digital board in front of her lane lit up. The number. Read 10.9, the highest possible score, and a rare one. For a moment, no one noticed. The sound of other shots and the crowd's attention was still on the more popular shooters. But then someone at the score table looked at her screen and blinked in surprise. "Did you see that?" he whispered. "She just scored a 10.9. The judge beside him leaned in. "That can't be right." Another shot. Another 10.9. People started to turn around. Dylan, who had been laughing earlier, paused as he glanced over and saw her scoreboard. His smile faded. Maria fired a third shot. Crack. Another 10.9. Now the crowd began to whisper. Heads turned. Pointed toward the quiet woman in the simple clothes. "Who is she? Where did she come from? Did she just hit 3 perfect shots?" Cameras that had been aimed at the favorite competitors slowly turned toward Maria. The event photographer quickly snapped a few pictures and whispered into his radio, "Get a camera on lane 6. Something's happening." Maria didn't notice the sudden attention. Or maybe she did, but she didn't care. She kept firing, each shot a mirror of the last one. Her arms were strong, her breathing smooth, her eyes locked onto the target like a hawk taut. Another 10.9 and another. People began clapping quietly, then louder. By the time she finished her 10th shot, her average was higher than anyone else in the entire competition. The scoreboard blinked, and the final number flashed across. A new championship record. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then, applause exploded from the crowd. The judges stood up. Coaches dropped their notebooks. Reporters rushed forward. People who had ignored her just minutes ago were now clapping, cheering, shouting her name. Dylan stared at the screen in disbelief. He had laughed at her, but now he couldn't even look her in the eyes. Maria slowly lowered her rifle and stepped back. She took off her cap and wiped her forehead with a small handkerchief. She didn't smile. She didn't jump or cheer. Just nodded to herself, as if confirming something quietly in her heart. A reporter pushed his way through the crowd and reached her first. "Ma'am, that was incredible. What's your name? Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Maria looked at him calmly and said, "My name is Maria Thompson. I learned to shoot on my father's farm." People leaned in to hear her soft voice. Another reporter asked, "Are you a former champion? Have you trained with anyone famous?" "No," Maria said. "I've never competed in a big championship before." The crowd couldn't believe it. A woman who had been ignored, mocked, and dismissed had just delivered one of the best performances in the history of the event. And she did it without fancy gear, without sponsors, without any noise. Just quiet skill and years of experience. Now everyone wanted to know who she was. Reporters started taking photos. Organizers were already preparing to verify the new record. And behind them all, the people who had laughed at her were now silent. Maria picked up her rifle case and quietly walked back to the waiting area. The same girl who had smiled at her earlier ran up to her and said, "You were amazing." Maria smiled gently. "Thank you." The girl's father, who had pulled her away earlier, now stood nearby with a guilty look. He nodded respectfully. Maria nodded back. Something had changed. She was no longer invisible. The crowd had turned completely silent just moments before. Maria fired her first shot, but the silence didn't last long. As her bullets hit the target again and again with unbelievable accuracy, the silence was replaced by whispers, then murmurs, and finally loud gasps of disbelief. People had come to the shooting championship expecting to see famous names and familiar winners. No one had prepared for a quiet, middle-aged woman with an old wooden rifle to steal the entire show, but that was exactly what happened. After Maria finished her round, the judges stood up from their chairs and walked toward the score screen. Their faces showed a mix of shock, confusion, and respect. One of the judges, Mr. Carter, who had been working at shooting events for over 20 years, wiped his glasses and stared again at the screen. "This must be checked again," he said softly. "She didn't miss, not even once." Another judge nodded. "I've never seen numbers like this, not even from the national champions." Meanwhile, the audience couldn't stop talking. Spectators were pointing at the scoreboard, replaying her shots on their phones, and asking each other the same question. Who is she? Maria, however, was already walking back toward her seat at the edge of the waiting area. Her face was calm. The same peaceful expression she had worn when she arrived that morning. Her body language didn't change. She didn't cheer or celebrate. She simply packed her rifle back into its case with care, just like she had done 1,000 times before. But unlike earlier, now people were watching her. Dylan, the same young man who had mocked her before the round, stood frozen at his spot. His mouth was slightly open, and his face had gone pale. He had scored well, but nowhere near what Maria had done. The difference was so large that even he had to admit she was in a completely different league. A few steps away, a woman in a blue uniform approached Maria. She was holding a clipboard and had a headset on. "Ma'am," she said respectfully, "the judges would like to speak with you. And several reporters, if that's all right." Maria looked at her and nodded. Of course, the woman smiled nervously. "Also, congratulations. That was unbelievable." Maria didn't respond with words. She just smiled softly, then followed the woman toward the judges' table. As they reached the front area, the lead judge, Mr. Carter, extended his hand. "Miss Thompson, it's an honor to meet you. You've just broken the state championship record, possibly even the national one. We will have to send your scores for official review, but from what we've seen, your shooting was flawless." Maria shook his hand firmly. "Thank you." Behind the judges, the media crowd had already gathered. Microphones were ready, cameras were flashing, and people were pushing forward to get a better look. Someone handed Maria a bottle of water. Another person tried to quickly wipe dust from her jacket for a better photo. She gently moved away and stood tall, still holding her rifle. The first reporter stepped up. He was from a popular sports news channel. "Miss Thompson, the world wants to know, who are you? Where have you been hiding this kind of talent?" Maria answered slowly, her voice quiet but clear. "I'm not hiding. I just never entered big competitions before." The reporter frowned. "But you shoot like a professional sniper. Your performance was better than Olympic-level shooters. I learned to shoot on my father's farm, taught me to aim properly and be patient. I've been practicing since I was a little girl," she said simply. Another reporter asked, "Do you have a coach or trainer?" "No. Have you ever entered any national or international competitions before today?" We're stunned. One of them whispered into his microphone, "This is one of the most shocking moments in sports history. A woman with no formal training just outperformed the best shooters in the region." One curious reporter stepped forward and said, "Earlier today, We saw a few competitors mocking you. How does it feel to prove them all wrong?" Maria looked toward the crowd where Dylan and others stood, their faces now red with embarrassment. "Wasn't here to prove anything," she said gently. "I was here to see if I still had what my father taught me." The crowd was silent again, but this time it was out of deep respect. Suddenly a girl from the audience ran up to Maria. It was the same young girl who had watched her earlier while she was cleaning her rifle. "You were amazing," the girl said, her eyes shining. "Can I learn to shoot like you?" Maria kneeled down and smiled at her. "Of course. You just need patience, practice, and a steady heart." The girl's father came forward, clearly ashamed.
Oh.
Dismissed Maria, thinking she didn't belong there. Now he was standing in front of a legend. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know who you were." Maria shook her head. "You didn't need to." Meanwhile, news about her had already spread beyond the competition. Social media pages were flooded with clips of her performance. Hashtags like #MariaTheMarksman and #SilentChampion were trending. People from around the world were watching her shot-by-shot video with disbelief. The internet was falling in love with a woman who had quietly walked into a championship and turned it upside down, back at the range. The event organizers approached her. "Miss Thompson, would you accept an invitation to the national level championship next month?" One of them asked. Maria looked thoughtful for a moment. "I'll think about it." That simple answer surprised everyone. Most people would have jumped at the chance. Maria was not most people. She didn't shoot for fame. She shot because it was part of who she was. A few sponsors also began lining up to speak with her. One company offered her a custom rifle. Another offered money and equipment. But Maria politely declined most of them. "My rifle works just fine," she said. One curious young man who had been watching everything quietly finally stepped forward and asked a question no one else had thought to ask. "Why now?"
I did.
"You choose to enter this championship after all these years?" Maria smiled and said, "My children are grown now. I have time. Why not?" Her answer was so simple, yet it left everyone speechless. As the crowd slowly began to move on to the next group of shooters, people kept turning back to look at her. Some waved. Some took pictures from a distance. Others just stood in silence. Even those who had mocked her were now her biggest admirers. Dylan finally walked up to her, holding out his hand awkwardly. "I'm sorry for what I said earlier," he admitted. You're incredible." Maria shook his hand and nodded. "We all learn at different times." His face turned red, but he smiled a little, truly humbled. That evening, Maria left the range the same way she arrived, quietly. She didn't ask for an award, didn't wait for anyone to escort her. She simply picked up her old rifle case, thanked the staff, and walked toward the exit. But this time, the crowd moved aside for her. They made a path and clapped as she passed. Some even saluted. The announcer's voice echoed one last time as she stepped out. "Let's all give a final round of applause for the shooter of the day, Maria Thompson, the woman who reminded us all what true skill and humility look like." She disappeared down the road. The sky above her turned golden with the setting sun. But for the people she left behind, her story had only just begun. Maria Thompson returned home from the shooting championship just like she had left, quietly and without any attention. But the world had changed in those few hours. By the time she reached her small house on the edge of her town, the news of her unbelievable shooting performance had already reached social media, local TV, and even international sports channels. Without knowing it, Maria had become famous. The next morning, she woke up early as she always did. She made herself a cup of tea, fed her chickens, and sat on the porch with her rifle beside her. It was peaceful, the way she liked it. But peace didn't last long. Her phone, which rarely rang, started buzzing again and again. Unknown numbers, news stations, sponsors, shooting organizations, and even old friends she hadn't heard from in years were trying to contact her. At first, Maria didn't answer. She didn't want the noise. But by the afternoon, she got a knock on her door. It was the local postman, out of breath and holding a large bundle of letters. "Miss Maria," he said with wide eyes, "I don't know what you did yesterday, but you've got more mail than our mayor," she chuckled. and thanked him. Inside the letters were messages from young girls, fathers, coaches, and even soldiers who had watched her shooting video. Some wrote, "You inspired my daughter." Others said, "I never believed in myself until I saw you shoot." She sat down slowly, holding a letter from a young boy who said he used to be scared of competition. But now he wanted to try because of her. Tears filled her eyes, not from pride, but from the feeling that she had touched lives just by being herself. Later that day, the same judge from the championship, Mr. Carter, called her. "Maria, I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said kindly. "Not at all," she replied. "I just wanted to tell you. Your scores have officially broken, not just the state record, but also the national record. You've become the highest scoring competitor in this event's history." Maria was quiet for a moment. "I didn't expect that," she said simply. "No," he replied. "That's what makes it even more special," he continued. "We're sending your name to the National Shooting Committee. They want to give you a special award. Also, several news channels have requested interviews. One of them wants to film a documentary about your life." Maria didn't know how to respond. She had lived a quiet life, far from cameras, far from crowds. All this attention felt strange. She thanked Mr. Carter and hung up the phone. That evening, a reporter from a small local newspaper came by. Unlike the others, she was gentle and polite. "Miss Thompson," she said, "I'm not here to ask about your scores. I just want to know your story, how you learned to shoot so well, and why you chose now to show the world." Maria invited her in. Sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, Maria began to share her past. "I grew up on a small farm. He believed that girls should learn the same skills as boys. So when I was just 10, he put a rifle in my hands and taught me to shoot. Not just to hit a target, but to understand it. He said the bullet should feel like an extension of your thought." The reporter listened closely, writing down every word. Maria continued, "We didn't have much. I never had fancy equipment. But I practiced every weekend. I'd line up empty cans, bottles, sometimes even old coins, and I'd shoot until I could hit anything, no matter the wind or distance." "Did you ever compete when you were younger?" the reporter asked. "Yes," Maria said. "I won a few small competitions when I was a teenager. People used to say I had natural talent, but then life happened. My mother got sick. I had to leave school to take care of her. Later I got married, had kids we didn't have money for, travel, or competition fees. So I gave up the dream." She paused and looked out the window, but I never stopped shooting. "Every Sunday morning I'd go out behind the woods and practice. It became my way of staying close to my father after he passed. He used to say, 'One day you'll make the bullets sing.' I never forgot that." The reporter sat in silence. Deeply moved, Maria smiled gently. "Then my kids grew up, moved out, and I found myself with time again. So I signed up for the championship. Not to win, just to see if I could still do what he taught me." The story spread like wildfire. News outlets titled it "The Farmer's Daughter Who Broke Records" and "The Silent Sniper Who Shocked the Nation." Maria, without ever chasing fame, had become a national inspiration. Sponsors kept calling, offering her gear, money, and TV spots. One company offered her $50,000 to appear in a commercial holding their new rifle. Maria refused. "I don't need another rifle," she said. "This one's been with me since I was 20. It knows me." Some called her old-fashioned, but most people admired her values even more. Soon after, a national TV show invited her for a live interview. Maria finally agreed, not for fame, but because she wanted to speak directly to the young people watching. On the show, the host asked her, "Maria, how did it feel when you broke the record?" Maria looked into the camera and said softly, "It felt the same as hitting a bottle on my father's fence. Focus, breath, stillness, the same joy." The host smiled. "What advice would you give to young girls who want to follow your path?" Maria didn't hesitate. "Don't wait for permission. Don't wait to be invited. Practice, work hard, and show up even if no one believes in you. Let your actions speak." The studio went silent, then erupted into applause. That night, hundreds of messages flooded her inbox. One came from a well-known Olympic coach who wrote, "If you ever want to train future champions, my doors are open." But Maria already had another plan. She contacted the local community center and offered to teach basic marksmanship to young girls for free. She said they don't need fancy gear. They just need a steady hand and a strong mind. At first, only 2 girls showed up, but word spread fast. By the end of the first month, more than 30 young students, both girls and boys, were attending her weekend classes. Some came from other towns. Parents watched from the sidelines, many of them with tears in their eyes. One father told her, "My daughter used to think she couldn't do anything special. Now she wakes up early every Sunday, waiting for your class." Maria simply smiled. One weekend, as she helped a girl line up her first shot, the girl asked, "Do you think I can shoot as good as you one day?" Maria placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "I don't think." "I know." Meanwhile, the shooting championship organizers invited her to return the following year as a guest of honor. This time, she wouldn't enter as an unknown. She would walk in as the reigning champion, the record holder, and the woman who had reminded the world that greatness doesn't always come dressed in bright uniforms or expensive gear. Sometimes it walks in quietly, with an old rifle, a calm heart, and the steady breath of someone who has waited her whole life for just one chance. Maria didn't change who she was, but the world around her had changed, and it would never forget her again. A full year had passed since Maria Thompson stepped onto that shooting range and shocked everyone with her perfect performance. But in that one moment, her quiet life had transformed completely. Though she remained the same simple woman from a small town, the world now saw her differently. She had become something more than a champion. She had become a symbol of quiet strength, patience, and pure skill. In her small town, Maria's life didn't look like a champion's life. She still woke up early each morning, made tea, fed her chickens, and cleaned her little house. She still used the same old rocking chair on her porch and wore her same faded cap. But on Sundays, her life felt different because that was the day her training classes took place. Every Sunday, children from nearby towns gathered at the open field near the woods behind Maria's house. The place had once been a quiet corner, where she practiced alone. Now it was alive with laughter, learning, and hope. Parents watched proudly from the sidelines while their children, some as young as 7, learned to hold rifles, aim at targets, and stay calm under pressure. Maria's classes were different from others. She didn't yell. She didn't use fancy technology. She taught through storytelling, patience, and steady practice. Her favorite line was always the same: "Shooting is not about power. It's about peace inside." Her first student, a shy girl named Emily, had grown confident. She now helped other children in class, adjusting their stances, correcting their aim. One afternoon, she hugged Maria and said, "You didn't just teach me to shoot. You made me believe in myself." That was the kind of victory Maria valued most. One day, a black car arrived in front of her house. A man in a dark suit stepped out and introduced himself as an official from the National Shooting Federation. He handed Maria an invitation to the International Shooting Gala in Washington, D.C. The letter read, "You are invited as a guest of honor. We would like to present you with the Lifetime Excellence in Marksmanship Award." Maria stared at the letter quietly. "I'm not sure I belong at a fancy gala," she said. The man smiled. "You belong more than anyone else." After thinking about it, Maria agreed to go, not for the award, but because she hoped her story might inspire others, especially young girls who still thought they were invisible. A week later, Maria traveled to Washington. It was the first time she had been on a plane. She sat quietly during the flight, looking out of the window, wearing her same old cap and jeans. When she arrived, hotel staff greeted her warmly. Even though she was dressed simply, people treated her like a celebrity. At the gala, the room was filled with people in formal clothes, suits, gowns, shiny shoes. Cameras flashed everywhere. Famous shooters, Olympic champions, and politicians filled the room. But when Maria walked in, the room fell quiet for a moment. Then came a loud round of applause. Everyone rose to their feet. She walked slowly to her table, slightly uncomfortable with all the attention. But her heart was calm, just like it had been on the shooting range. Later that evening, when her name was announced, she walked to the stage and accepted the award. It was a golden plaque with her name engraved on it. She held it up, not with pride but with grace. The host offered her the microphone. Maria took a deep breath and said, "I am thankful for this honor. But I'm not here because of records or awards. I'm here because my father believed in me before anyone else did. He taught me to shoot not for competition, but for focus. He taught me to trust myself even when no one else does. And I want every young girl watching this to remember, if you have a dream, don't wait for applause. Start small, keep going, and one day the world will notice." The audience was silent, moved deeply. Then came the applause, longer and louder than any other speech that night. After the event, a famous shooter approached her and said, "You've changed this sport. Not by competing, but by reminding us why we started shooting in the first place." Maria thanked him and returned home the next day, holding her plaque inside a simple cloth bag, back in her town. People lined the streets when she arrived. It was the first time they had ever held a celebration for anyone. Children waved handmade signs that said things like "Maria, our hero," and "Thank you for believing in us." The mayor handed her a key to the city and said, "You've brought pride to our small town." Maria smiled, but deep inside, she felt something stronger than pride. She felt peace. She had walked a long path in silence, and now not only had the world seen her, but she had opened the door for many others to walk behind her. Her Sunday classes became more than just shooting lessons. They turned into life lessons. Some kids came just to talk, to listen, or to feel encouraged. One boy whose mother had passed away said, "Being here feels like having a family again." Maria hugged him and said, "That's exactly what. We are a family that believes in each other." Soon, her program was given funding from the state. A proper shooting range was built near the old woods, named the Maria Thompson Training Center. Sign read, "Where confidence takes aim." Maria didn't change her ways. She still wore her old clothes. She still used her wooden rifle. When asked why she never bought a new one, she replied, "This rifle and I have been through everything together. How would I trade it for something that doesn't know my hands?" Reporters still visited sometimes, but she always gave them the same message: teach the young ones. Let them know they are enough. That's what matters. Over time, more girls from rural areas started signing up for competitions. Many of them said the same thing during interviews. "I saw Maria Thompson shoot. She looked like my mother, my aunt, my teacher. And I thought if she can do it, maybe I can too." Maria became more than a champion. She became a movement. One year, during a major competition, a young girl stepped onto the range. She wore simple jeans and held an old wooden rifle, just like Maria. When asked who her coach was, she smiled and said, "Maria Thompson, that girl won second place." And when she received her medal, she said on stage, "This is not just my win. This is Maria's win too. It gave me the courage to believe I belonged here." Maria was watching from home on her small TV. She wiped her eyes and whispered, "You did it, little one." In the final years of her life, Maria received many awards, honors, and recognitions, but she never let them change who she was. Remained the same simple woman who had once been ignored on a shooting range until her first shot broke records. When Maria passed away peacefully at the age of 81, the entire nation mourned. Newspapers wrote headlines like, "The woman who aimed for the heart." A statue was built at the shooting range in her town, showing Maria in her signature pose, calm and steady, holding her rifle. Her story became a part of school books, inspiring future generations. Her famous words were engraved on the base of the statue: "Don't wait to be seen. Be steady, be patient, and one day your shot will speak louder than words." Maria Thompson never shouted for attention. She never demanded respect. She earned it one silent shot at a time.